Ewan, I'll be honest, I've been looking forward to this one with your background. So thanks so much for joining us on Behind the Wheel and obviously welcoming to you today. For people who don't know who you are, do you want to set up a quick introduction?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Ewan Baldry, obviously. I'm the chief engineer for Czinger Vehicles over in Los Angeles. I've been over here now for, it'll be 7 years in November.
Brilliant.
So, yeah, it's been an incredible adventure. Still loving it. And yeah, happy to join you today.
Thank you very much. Before we go into your career, let's just break down who you are outside of work.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm a loving father of two boys. Got two sons, one 19 who is at Long Beach University down the road here, and then Louis, my youngest son, who is fast becoming a California kid. So he's a surfing, drumming, golfing, you name it. And so a lot of my time is spent really just outside of work, ferrying the boys around, watching them do sports and pastimes, and yeah, I really enjoy that. It's great fun.
Yeah, amazing. You've got some personal projects, right? So even though you're busy hustling and bustling, well, we'll go through your career, and obviously you've done all sorts. But when even at Zynga with the demanding work at Zynga, you've then also fancied just doing your own projects even whilst you're in LA, right?
Yeah. I'm a kind of like a magpie for rusty old bits of crap, really. I've done a few restoration projects, actually all European stuff, which is maybe just because it's a little bit more in my comfort zone. But I've done a couple of Volkswagen Beetles, and a Carmen Ghia, and two or three Vespas. The best of which was genuinely four cardboard boxes full of scrap that I managed to restore. But yeah, I mean, it's just a bit of me time. I love kind of old stuff, and looking at how problems were solved kind of back in the day, and like particularly, air cooled things, particularly kind of monocoque structures. So I love like the Vespa because it's this, monocoque structure, and just as well, I think just a real great example of problem solving for the time, post war, having to get people mobile and just the solutions that were put in place to do that. So I'm kind of a little bit of a early out of bed at the weekend. My wife and kids less so, and so I spend a few hours in the garage tinkering. But most importantly, there's no time frames to these things. They'll be done when they're done. I'm doing it for fun. I don't like to put pressure on myself.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's great. I enjoy it.
amazing. There's enough pressure at work, right? There's enough.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Final point was car fanatic turning into a late fitness fanatic.
Yeah, so I did a lot of sport as a kid, captain the rugby team and bits and pieces like that at school. And then I suppose really just threw myself into work. I've always been in, pretty intensive, committed roles and tasks, that has meant it's been difficult. And then, I again have really kind of played an active role in bringing the kids up. So it hasn't been a lot of time for health and fitness. But since coming out here, and just starting to knock on a bit now, it's actually inspired by a LinkedIn post by Matt Windle, the then Lotus MD, and he was on a program, and I called him, and he kind of waxed lyrical about this work he was doing with this guy called Will Davison back in the UK. So to cut a long story short, I've lost, I don't know, 35, 40 pounds, and now, kind of running and a bit of fitness is part of my daily life, and feel a hell of a lot better for it. So it's obviously easy to do over here as well with the sunshine and the ocean. But yeah, I'm pleased to say that it's become, just part of my daily habits,
Love
which
that.
is nice.
Yeah, amazing. We're gonna have to go into your career. So let's
Yeah.
let's start with maybe how you entered the space, things that will happen at uni. Do you want to kick it off with how you entered the space?
Yeah, I studied mechanical engineering at the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow with
Brilliant.
a slight slant on aerodynamics as a kind of specialisation. Ended up doing a master's for an MEng, which is effectively kind of doing the final year twice, such that you pick more modules and do a slightly meatier kind of dissertation. Um, I- if I'm honest, I was a car guy as a kid, but then less so as I got older. But I knew that I wanted to be involved in the designing and making of things, the kind of creative bit. I'm not particularly artistic, but I like the idea of creating stuff. And so, design engineering was really what it was at. Having said that, the course was very much trying to kind of gear people up to go and work for fairly large organizations in engineering management. I towed the line and went and did a placement with British Rail, um, and because that was the expectations. I hated it, and from that point on, just thought, right, what, I've got to get into something that's faster turnaround. My interest is in projects that are relatively quick in terms of evolution and development cycles. The idea of being involved in like an aircraft program that's kind of 15 years in the
There we
making is
go.
just not something for me. And by chance, in those days, they used to have Open University TV programs on late at night. We'd been out for a night out, came back kind of drunk, and switched the TV on, and there was a program all about Reynard racing cars,
That's
and
crazy.
it just really struck a nerve,
Yeah.
and I was like, that's it, that's what I want to do. And from that point forward, I just really kind of immersed myself in getting up to speed on kind of racing car design technology. I applied to Reynard for an internship. Unfortunately, didn't get one, but managed to get some stuff, placements with a small race car company called Chevron, and really went from there. So upon graduating, my ambition was to get into Formula One. Wrote to all the Formula One teams, got into that kind of cycle of no experience. How do you gain experience if you can't get some experience, sort
Yeah.
of thing? And ended up taking a graduate position with Rolls-Royce Bentley.
Yeah.
So that was my first job. Worked in the validation team there, and again, it was just a bit of a struggle for me. It was, again, too big of an organization. I was, responsible for a very small part of validation, and I wanted to, as said before, be the kind of, involved in the creative process. So um, I remember seeing an auto car cover. Of TVR showing the original Speed 12,
Yeah. Brilliant.
and it really kind of struck me. So I wrote a letter to Peter Wheeler telling him how I was working at Rolls-Royce, didn't really like it, any chance of moving up to Blackpool. And I think he's a guy that liked to kind of rock establishment a little bit. So I think it probably appealed to him that I was working for a well-known company like Rolls-Royce Bentley, but was looking to move to his company. So another long story short, was working there in a fairly short space of time, and TVR. For a young engineer was just like the perfect place.
Yeah.
As a design engineer there, you don't turn up and get on a CAD station. You get a hammer out and a hacksaw and some metal and make some stuff, and then think about designing it later if it works.
Amazing.
um, I mean, definitely a little bit back to front, but a great kind of introduction to, I guess, real engineering. Learned a lot of my own, hand skills there. So I learned to weld and, use tools and machinery, which I think subsequently stood me in good stead when I did become a proper design engineer, because I had a much better appreciation of how to make it.
Yeah. Really good stuff.
Um, yeah, so I worked within the race division there, turning that Speed 12 race car into a thing. But still, was frustrated because I wasn't obviously in charge of it. And, in those days I had a lot of self-confidence and, wanted to be the boss. So I decided to start designing my own race car.
Amazing.
And the idea was to use that as a marketing tool, really, to try and get a job in Formula One, which was my ambition. TVR then were racing in the British GT Championship, and we and in those days, the British GT Championship was a support race for the F1 race at Silverstone.
Yeah.
So I was lucky to be one of the team members to go and support the car in the race. And we got kind of lucky with the conditions and found ourselves on the right tyre at the right time, and most others weren't because it had just started to rain. And so our car kind of, took the lead, and it was, it kind of shocked everybody. And then at the end of the race, our driver kind of walked back to the paddock area with a guy wearing Williams Formula One stuff. I was like, wow, who's this guy? So immediately pounced on him and said, hey, how can I get a job in Formula One? And he said, well, to be honest, I work in the marketing kind of department, so I'm not totally sure. But he said, I tell you what, if you send me your resume, your CV, I'll make sure it gets to the right person.
Amazing.
And amazingly, yeah, within 4 weeks, I was working at Williams F1, which, again, I thought was really my my calling. I thought it was the ultimate, and to be honest, it was a fantastic experience. And the other end of the spectrum to TVR, where yes, then I was based behind a CAD station full time, designing parts. Producing the drawings, so learning about the kind of real discipline of engineering design, and in that kind of, again, fast-paced world of a new car every year. But I'd started this design of my own racing car and was still kind of bitten by that. So I would do my day job at Williams, and then in the evenings I would carry on the CAD station doing my own racing car, and would return back to the Northwest where my house and girlfriend, now wife, was, and kind of make the bits that I'd been designing. I guess it really came to a kind of crunch time that I'd been at Williams for a year and a half or so, been kind of bitten by this bug of designing my own car. It was gathering a bit of momentum. My grandfather passed away, unfortunately, but he left me a little bit of money to potentially realize this car that I'd been designing. So came to a bit of a crossroads, which was either commit to Formula One, ask my girlfriend, now wife, to move down to Oxfordshire and really kind of commit to that. And I spoke to a few people at Williams, and many, if not all, again, are frustrated kind of race car designers, want to kind of do their own project. And so a lot of them were like, give it a go. And I guess the real decision point was I plucked up the courage to go to speak to Patrick Head, who was the technical director of the time, and told him about this thing I was doing. And he was like, have you got kids? Are you married? And I was like, no, not yet. And he said, well, listen, if you're going to do it, now's the time. And he said to me, what I would do is work out how long it's going to take you, work out how much it's going to cost, treble them both. And if it still seems like a good idea, then go for it. So, and nicely he said, and, if it doesn't work out, you can always give us a call. And if there's a spot, we'd take you back. So I left and founded my little race car company called Juno Racing Cars, where it was me in a shed, and that's really, I guess the next phase and stage of my life, really building a little company from scratch. And it was cool. It's very cool.
It's an amazing story to go from TVR, then get your experience in the F1 that you've always wanted, but it's just that entrepreneurship was like chipping away at you, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think it's just, Williams and Formula One in general by that point, necessitated large teams. And, I was involved, at the point of me leaving, was involved with the gearbox design, and it was really just kind of evolutionary design rather than revolutionary. It was taking what existed, making improvements to it for the next season, saving a bit of mass, making things a little bit faster, and I loved it, and I loved the kind of no holds barred approach to it. That I remember designing this tiny little bit that had to get spark eroded to get it manufactured, and it was like squillions of pounds to have it produced, but it didn't matter. It was worth it. And so I loved that part of it, but the frustration I had was just that I wanted to know how the whole, all the car worked,
Yeah,
and the days really of Adrian Newey's and people like that, that even that era had passed. The
yeah,
teams were quite big and needed lots of people. So I just thought the only way I'm going to figure out and understand all of it is to step back and do my own thing and
amazing.
and and build a car from scratch.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. Yeah,
Do,
yeah,
do you want to talk through how your venture progressed?
yeah. Sure. So yeah, Juno Racing Cars was the company. And I, quickly again realized some of the limitations I had around kind of access to equipment, machines, resources. But again, luckily, and I think I was pretty good in those days at spotting kind of angles and opportunities. And I wasn't, afraid to go and ask and, be a bit kind of cheeky and, hustle a little bit. So, it was at the time when motorsport engineering degree courses were starting up. So I think Oxford Brookes were kind of the leaders
Yeah.
in that. But by chance, the University of Central Lancashire in Preston, which was closest to where my house was, that I'd been kind of commuting backwards and forwards to, had also started a motorsport engineering degree course. Mechanical engineering, they were really struggling to recruit in general across the kind of university networks. And so in order to attract students, and again, it was at the time when they were starting to obviously all charge for tuition, and
Yeah.
grants were becoming a thing of the past. So in order to, dare I say it, kind of sex up mechanical engineering, they started to rebadge them. And so the courses were fundamentally mechanical engineering degree courses, but with an application towards motorsport engineering, as it was in this case. And so I contacted them and told them what I was doing, told them where I was coming from, and they were just like, "Oh yes, please, please could you
Yeah.
come?
Yeah.
Because we know how to deliver the academic bit, but we're not totally sure how to make the application work." And it was quite an old, workshop facility that they'd had. But I turned up with this kind of idea, and they were like, please come. So they cleared this whole workshop and said, listen, you can build the first Juno here. You can use the machines, the equipment, as long as the students can kind of watch and, ideally become involved. And it was, a perfect kind of mutual back scratching
Amazing.
exercise, I would
Yeah.
say. So I helped them, I helped them find a Formula Ford. We built a Formula Ford. We restored a Formula Ford race car there. We went and raced it in the Northwest Championship, so the students were
Oh,
getting
wow.
kind of hands-on experience. And I guess I was the guy that was kind of enabling that and giving them the confidence to do it. And then obviously, clearly, we got involved in Formula Student and things. But in the meantime, as I said, I was, the first Juno was built on their premises, and again, it took a little time to kind of get it to run smoothly. But what I had were all these kind of willing slaves, the students who were desperate to kind of get involved in projects and toys around, around me building this racing car. Um, and it was hard at first because I was obviously so consumed by it, and I had all these people kind of asking me questions. But what I quickly realized was if I could give them like an hour of quality time from me, kind of, instructing and, suggesting how they should go about it, I'd get like 10 hours back. And so it just required that little bit of discipline for me to kind of take a breath and make sure they were clear and knew what they were doing. And to cut again another very long story short, Juno grew from, me at the uni in a shed. We then got our own premises. We ended up, we built about 55 cars in total that we sold around the world, and we traveled around the world supporting the cars. We won a few championships, and every employee we ever had was a product of that course, because obviously I had the great advantage of getting to know them, dare I say, kind of cherry picking the good ones. And I guess a great extension to that story is, just the other side of this wall here at Zinger, there's a few products of that course here. So, I've got this kind of black book of, maybe 1,000 students that I lectured through the years, whilst doing Juno racing, but also lecturing on the engineering course. And so there's rarely a problem that comes up that I can't kind of, look through LinkedIn and go, oh yeah, John, I remember John. John's now working at, Myra or, wherever. So it's been a fantastic resource, and something actually that we're just embarking on here is to build the relationship with Long Beach University, which is our
Amazing.
most local university, and
Yeah.
to try and again get into that position of this kind of mutual back scratch. Everyone's a winner. We're
Yeah.
looking to recruit people, but we'd like to make sure we get to know them and can help shape them and mold them before we recruit them.
Yeah.
They're desperate and crying out for experience, and
Yeah.
so it's a real win-win if you can
Uh,
champion it and make it happen.
I think you're doing me out of a job. I tried to push I tried to push myself to build this like sustainable talent pools. How do you get it? And you've got the full blueprint.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as you're doing with this kind of thing,
Yeah.
you know that there's these kind of fringe activities where if you champion it and put the energy into it, it just creates kind of massive value add, I would say. And
Really does.
yeah, it might seem to some people like some kind of weird distraction, but I think if you can keep focused on what it can ultimately deliver, if you get there, it's a
Yeah.
great thing. And in
Yeah.
particular, as I said, when everyone's a winner, then why not?
Yeah, it's a brilliant initiative. It's a brilliant gap, and I hope that comes to fruition. By the way, I think it's a really good initiative that you're trying to drive there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Th-
yeah. That's good.
there's a lot of gold in the next generation of talent if you get it right. There's no two ways
Yeah,
about that.
absolutely.
So we've got to talk about it. So there was a gap after your joint venture. You had a really interesting, not twist, but an interesting embarkment that you went on, and then we're obviously going to jump into how on earth you ended up in LA.
Yeah. So yeah, Juno really kind of got up and running in sort of 2006, 2007. There was a really strong endurance race series in Europe called the V2V. We managed to build a car for that. We managed to win the championship on our second kind of attempt at it. It was kind of going a little bit into the lion's den. They were mainly French manufacturers. Most of the races were in France, and we were this kind of British contingent. But nevertheless, yes, it's still small fry by normal standards, but we did do it from scratch. We got to the point of building 15 or so cars per year, and they were kind of 100 grand a piece, something like that. So um, fell on hard times at the recession of 2008. Most of our customers were businessmen who raced as a hobby. Obviously, with the recession, even if they weren't necessarily kind of affected, they were still potentially laying people off, and it wouldn't have looked cool to be seen going racing at that time. And we'd committed to some new projects where we'd kind of committed financially to some, and then didn't get the return as quickly as we'd expected, just because of the kind of general economic conditions. However, got through it, managed to keep things alive, and kind of was rebuilding the company and paying off the creditors from that happening. And I'm really proud to say that we did that. We paid everybody off and
Amazing.
kind of kept things rolling. But by then, how old would I have been? 2008, 2009, 30-ish, something like that. Didn't have quite that kind of hustler mindset, and was a little bit punch drunk from going through the experience of going bust, because I wasn't a business guy. I took it very much to heart,
Yeah.
it affected me. It knocked my confidence a lot. Anyway, got it back up and running, managed to keep going, but had a success in applying for some grant funding to develop a carbon fiber chassis
Amazing.
through the Niche Vehicle Network, who were a great support for us, actually. And so everything was moving to composites. I had this idea about how we could do a composite chassis, but a process that would be significantly cheaper than the typical processes. So that's how we managed to win the funding. And as part of that, had a chance introduction to Lawrence Tomlinson, who obviously is the owner of Ginetta. And Lawrence and I met and started chatting around a collaboration. He was looking and interested in doing an LMP3 car, for the new FIA series that was being kind of talked about then. So the original discussion was I'd got this grant funding. We would kind of work together to make a chassis that he could use for his project and I could use for mine. And so we'd have this kind of period of converging and working together and then going off and doing our separate things again. He invited me over to Ginetta and said, actually, I've been thinking about it. Why don't you just bring Juno over here and we can, you can run this place from a technical perspective. And Ginetta was like Juno on steroids, kind of plus plus plus. It was, like a much bigger toy shop. Obviously, Lawrence was committed to it and was wealthy and was able to make things happen. And I guess a bit like me, or more like me, was wired to kind of punch above his weight and to have a lot of kind of self-belief and confidence. So I joined. We originally formed Ginetta Juno, which was kind of him to kind of incorporate that, and so the LMP3 started out as a Ginetta Juno project. However, after just a few months, I kind of felt really comfortable and happy there, and sort of said, listen, this Ginetta Juno bit kind of just adds confusion.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to drop it if you want to drop it. So we dropped it. I managed to actually bundle up Juno and sold it on to somebody else, an existing Juno customer. So that meant that Juno kind of had a lifeline too.
Love that.
And started to build the team to put together this LMP3 car. And that was again another massive whirlwind. The regulations for LMP3 weren't published until October 2014, and the idea was to start racing cars in April 2015. So that's a pretty short space of
It's a
time.
very short. It's very
Clean,
short.
clean sheet of paper. Never done a carbon chassis before. Never done a crash program before. But just had wired into this organization
Love
that,
it.
like me, just had a lot of kind of self-belief, but a healthy dose of insecurity, which is, I think, really what kind of drives you. Is inside this kind of core of massive self-confidence, but wrapped around it this insecurity knocking on your door every day going, hey, Ewan, are you sure you can do this? And that's what kind of gets you out of bed in the morning, or at least gets me out of bed in the morning. So yeah, we managed to do it. We delivered some cars to customers and we entered the race, and for the 2015 season the only LMP3 cars we're racing were Ginetta's. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't like plain sailing, and we had to kind of evolve the car through the year. But nevertheless, LMP3 probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Lawrence committing and making it happen. And then obviously, kind of Ligier and others followed on after that. And yeah, Ginetta was just again a wonderful, great experience. Lawrence was prepared to put his money where his mouth was. He's just one of these kind of superhumans that I've met through my career, like massively intelligent, but but always switched on, like always on the go. I don't know where these people get their energy from. I kind of have met people out here who know Elon Musk pretty well because they've been involved with SpaceX, and similarly wired person who's just constantly going and constantly believing and pushing to make things happen. And that was my experience there. And we did a few variants after the LMP3 car. This thing called the G58, which was really, how Ginetta would have done it if they could have written their own regulations, which Ginetta could do because it had this motorsport ladder of, the G40 and the GT4 car and the G55 and all the things that followed, and and Ginetta's a great kind of motorsport ladder that existed, and this, I said we did these variants, but then. I guess since the Juno days, my real passion and ambition was Le Mans. That was the pinnacle of endurance racing. And Lawrence was up for putting a car into the LMP1 category. and we were going up against kind of, Toyota and in fact Porsche and Audi when we committed to do it, although they then pulled out because of Dieselgate. Um, but similar kind of thing, we committed to it in February 2017, I think it was, and we had a car at the Autosport show in January 2018.
It's unreal.
And again, crash test program, custom gearbox, brand new tub, all new bodywork. We did a wind tunnel program with Williams, Williams Advanced Engineering. And we were, tiny team. I think there were 6 of us at Ginetta, designing this car from scratch. And that's just, again, what I loved was just that kind of, build a team, be super agile. They call it scrappy out here. That makes it sound like you're not doing things properly. It actually just means that you're kind of super agile and
Yeah,
are in this kind of process of, move fast, fail fast, fix it, and then go again.
yeah,
And unfortunately, that LMP1 program was hamstrung by a customer that never actually turned up. So, we had, via another race team, a Chinese customer who were promising this money to turn up. And so the money never arrived. And we found ourselves really in this unfortunate position of the rules meant you had to kind of turn up, but no one was paying the bills to turn up. So unfortunately, it fell to Lawrence again to put his hand in his pocket to kind of keep the thing alive. And we managed to go and race the cars at Le Mans. So whilst we were meant to have started racing sooner because the money never turned up from these Chinese sponsors, we would turn up at the events to prove the cars existed and prove that we were ready to compete,
yeah.
but that the money wasn't available. Anyway, yeah, we ended up debuting the cars at Le Mans, and I've got some pictures still here in my office in Los
Amazing.
Angeles of our cars, blasting down the Mulsanne Straight and in the square here at Le Mans. So super proud to have done that, and against all odds, we got a car to the finish.
Amazing.
So we finished 5th in LMP1 on our debut event, and that was a massive kind of honour, and really was setting me up for really the future. And having finished Le Mans, we realised at Le Mans that the engine choice we'd made was not a good one. We then started doing the design to put a different engine in the car, which subsequently proved that the car was competitive. I'd left by this point, but the car raced off into the distance at Shanghai the following season.
Amazing.
Unfortunately, it didn't win. It had some gremlins, but nevertheless, it demonstrated the competitiveness and kind of vindicated what we'd done. But yeah, then how did I end up being here? Well, I was away on summer vacation, summer holiday in Wales camping. It was raining, and I was just sat in the tent with the kind of raindrops pitter pattering on the tent, and my phone rang, and as it pops up on an iPhone, it said Beverly Hills. I was like, "What? No one, no one's ever phoned me from Beverly Hills before." So I'll answer this one, and answered it, and it was a headhunter who just said, "Hey, we've come across your profile on LinkedIn. How do you fancy 3D printing hypercars in Los Angeles?" I was like, "What?" And, definitely wasn't looking. Was happy at Ginetta, but clearly was intrigued. And my family anyway. My wife and kids are kind of adventurous types, but my wife's from Rochdale, and I'd already moved her from Preston to Harrogate in Yorkshire, which was a big step. She was like, "No way, I'm from Lancashire. We're not living in Yorkshire." And so then I said, just had this call from Los Angeles. She's like, "Absolutely no chance. Definitely not." I was like, "Hang on a minute." So they'd actually said, "Listen, we'll fly. We realize this is a big deal. We'd fly the whole family out to LA. Come over for an interview. Worst case scenario, you've had a nice little vacation on us." And so I kind of said that to my wife, and she's like, "Oh, okay, but we're definitely not moving. We're definitely not moving. We're definitely not moving to Los Angeles." And I remember we landed, and the drive from the airport to where we were staying in Hermosa Beach pretty kind of bland, and we were jet lagged, and she was kind of looking around at me, and I was like, oh God, yeah, what have we done? What are we doing? Anyway, came and visited Divergent. So Divergent's the parent company. We'll come on to this obviously, but Divergent was the parent company of Czinger and was, the company that existed at the time. And I came and saw what was going on here and was just immediately kind of bitten by it and sold at the idea of it. And they'd put us up in a hotel on the beach in Hermosa Beach. So I'd been for my interview and was like, gosh, how am I going to break this? Because I really want to do this. This is like
Yeah.
a kind of sliding doors moment. And luckily got back to the beach, and my wife and kids were kind of playing on the beach, and Zoe said to me, it's actually quite nice, isn't it? And so I was like, right, okay. So anyway, we went out for dinner and chatted about it, and we basically just came to the conclusion, like, let's regret doing it rather than regret not doing it. Imagine, you know, dinner parties from then on, sort of, oh yeah, we went out to California for an interview, but we decided not to, and decided to stay in the UK. And so we agreed and said, let's give it a shot. And so I actually came myself for the first 6 months. I was hired as the director of structures, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I came for 6 months on my own, but kind of did a bit of commuting backwards and forwards, and during school holidays, the family would come out. Because I started in the end of November 2018, and the idea was to finish the school year in the UK and then for them to join, which they did. And again, we said kind of internally to the family, Joe in particular, our eldest son, who was 13 at the time, kind of has right of veto, and if he ends up not liking it, we'll complete a school year and go back. And anyway, we've been here, 7 years now, and are pretty immersed in California life, and are super happy about it and really enjoying it. And as I've said, I've managed to tempt a few more people out from the UK to join the team. So yeah, it's been great.
It's been brilliant. Do you want to give us a quick insight into how so you started as did you say chief of structures, director of structures?
Yeah,
And
director of structures. Yeah, so at that time, when I came here, it had 10 or so metal printers. If I'm honest, I didn't even know metal printing was that kind of prolific then. And they had some robots as well, but it was very much in the early days. And but nevertheless, I saw the parts that were being produced and was like, wow, I didn't realize it was like at this level. And they'd specifically looked to hire someone from the motorsport world. So they'd said to this headhunter, listen, we want you to go and get someone from the motorsport world. Structures, at that time was the core, and probably still is, the core of Divergent. It was the engineers who were designing the structures to be printed, and the company was a real mishmash, to be honest, of scientists and boffins and technologists and people from large automotive OEM land. And really what that meant was that you had this group of people that were struggling really to commit, because the OEM companies were like, we got to do validation to within an inch of its life, and the scientists were like, God, I'm just not sure the material's quite ready, and and the printing guys were like, we're still seeing voids occasionally, and how do we kind of cope with that? And so in hiring me, they were just looking, I think, to get someone who was wired in a way of, like most people who work in motorsport, there's a race on this date. We will be at that race, come hell or high water, we will be there. And really that had been, I guess, my career to that point. So my job was to just come in and really kind of spot the opportunities for how we could, short circuit the process, to bring this kind of, again, mentality of like fail fast and fix and move to a date. it wasn't a race we were working towards. It was Pebble Beach 2019, where we wanted to show this car. And it's important to say, actually, as well, at the time, the car, at least to the employees of Divergent, it wasn't promoted as it being a product. It was really about having an in-house application for the engineers to kind of develop the technology around. So I think really smartly, Kevin Czinger, the founder, and Lucas Czinger, his son, who's now obviously Lucas is the CEO of both Czinger and Divergent. I think they were just really smart to realize that there's a danger in developing this technology with a customer, because obviously it's so new, and there are going to be issues along the way, and problems to get around, and trying to do that with a customer, you've got real kind of credibility challenges there, and I think particularly in OEM land, there would be this kind of potential of one strike and you're out kind of
Yeah.
situation. So yeah, I think they were super smart to say, let's develop our own product in house. Therefore, we can like fuck it up and fix it, and
Yeah.
and and keep moving. And also the kind of logic of it being a hypercar was great logic. At the time, the kind of the cost of the technology, the production rate of the technology was appropriate and fitting for a hypercar bomb,
Yeah.
and the kind of
Yeah.
hypercar volumes. And also, of course, at the end, you output this product that people hopefully go, wow, look at that thing, And so
Yeah.
really our objective was to show people that you can build a car this way. Um, and so, yeah, as I said, Pebble Beach 2019, we were still all Divergent. The company rented a nice villa up in Monterey for Car Week, and showed the car kind of privately to, to OEM land,
Yeah.
and started again to kind of prove and demonstrate the technology, but also, I guess, to the kind of, hypercar, sect. And the response that the car got started to kind of feed this idea of, we've invested all this money in this, proof of concept effectively. People like it. What about if we put it into production? I'm pretty sure Kevin had this probably on his agenda, before this time, but
Yeah.
I think it was pretty smart again that it wasn't really pushed internally as that, because again, because we weren't necessarily at that stage building a full road going car, it meant that we didn't have to get bogged down by too many things that would have kind of delayed things. It made able to keep moving. Anyway, I suppose I was seen to kind of do the job in terms of getting the structures group confident in designing and releasing things, and delivering stuff. And that first car was a real science project, I would say. There was a lot of
Yeah.
unnecessary science in it.
Yeah.
That one example, it was decided by the then powertrain boss that we needed to design our own clutch. That was incredibly complicated, and as a result, not reliable. So we couldn't test the car just because the clutch kept failing. So um, and we weren't meant to be a clutch company.
No.
So in my free time, a bit like the old Juno days where I was doing my day job and then in the evening was tinkering around with something else. In the evening, I started to look at whether we could package an off-the-shelf car, a clutch, sorry, in the car, just to be able to get it up and running. And it was, as I said, like an off-the-radar project, because it wasn't really my job. I was the director of structure at the time. But nevertheless, I kind of managed to demonstrate that we could do that, and
Love that.
so it was agreed that we would do it. And I think that kind of got me a little bit under the spotlight of Kevin and Lucas. And to cut yet another longish story short, I was asked if I'd be interested in becoming the chief engineer
Amazing.
for Czinger. And so Czinger was originally founded in 2020. We built a second of this early prototype car, sent them to Geneva, break cover and tell the world. Unfortunately, Geneva got cancelled because of COVID, and so we had a bit of a kind of pumping of the brakes then and a rethink. And that's really where I was asked, hey Ewan, what would you do to this car um, to make it a record breaker? So my first task was to build a team, make changes to the car such that we could go and take on the Laguna Seca lap record, which is a well-known track that's based in California, so just up the road from here. So practical in terms of being able to take it on. The record at the time was held by the McLaren Senna, so there was a bit of kudos around that. I would say in those early days, I did, I guess, as you would, kind of default a little bit back to my little black book of motorsport contacts, and invited a few people over from kind of the UK and Europe to augment the existing team of people here. But again, just to bring that mentality that we needed at that stage to we're not building a race car, but we're kind of more on the race car spectrum at this stage.
Yeah.
We're going to go and try and break a lap record around a track. We're going to be using suppliers that are much more on the motorsport spectrum too, so the likes of kind of X-Track and other suppliers that are more familiar with motorsport or super low volume automotive stuff. So needed people that could interface with those companies, and thank God we took the car to Laguna Seca and broke the track record.
It's unbelievable.
Which and that was a funny one too, because it was understandably we're in a kind of location of huge optimism, of of the potential for investing in these kind of programs. But of course, the USA hasn't really had a performance automotive brand, and the people here are buying McLarens and Paganis and Bugattis, so European offerings. And a lot of the early days were people saying to me like, Ewan, do you really think we can beat the McLaren Senna? I mean, that's McLaren, do you really think it's possible? And I think, again, my message was always just like, McLaren are just human beings. It's a brand, of course, but they're just human beings like we are, and it's about having the right mindset and about obviously making some good choices around the technology and of the car and the layout of the car. But fundamentally, it's just about human spirit and believing we can do it and working hard.
I think sometimes the beauty about doing this podcast, and being honest with you, it's like you unearth the humans behind the products, and it really is that. It's what's behind it. It's amazing, really.
And and now we've hired people that have come from these companies like McLaren and Pagani and things like that, and then you start to realize, there's no magic. We're all just dealing with the laws of physics, and and I think that's it. It's just about this kind of human kind of can-do attitude, and the great thing here is it comes from the top. Kevin and Lucas are both. I mean, I like to use the term dreamers, but I think that's potentially some negative connotations. But I think you really have to dare to dream to kind of get a venture like this off the ground. But you can't just be a dreamer. You then have to be a hard worker, and you have to, and most of all, be super tenacious. So there's lots of kind of knocks along the way, and you pick up battle scars along the way, but you've just got to be so quick at dusting yourself down, going back to that kind of core of self-confidence and self-belief that that you can do this, and that's really what it's been about.
I think it's I'll never put words in your mouth, but I think it's clear as day of what some of your achievements are here. When you reflect, there's a point that you made to me regarding Jethro Bovingdon.
Yeah. I mean, I would say my absolute career highlight to date, because when you go racing cars, it's pretty. You find out pretty easily whether you're any good or not. It's do you win the race or not,
Yeah.
or how close were you to winning the race, and there's nowhere to hide and that kind of stuff. And the lap records that the Czinger cars have done, again, is kind of in my comfort zone, more in my comfort zone, and something that I can get my head around and understand pretty easily. But I've never done a hypercar program before. I've never done a road car program before to this level. And the real kind of acid test for me was having an automotive journalist, Jethro Bovingdon, who's driven all of the other cars, to have him test the car. And that was the most nerve-wracking experience of my life. And I had a massive build-up to it because I watched all of his reviews of all the other cars, and as he was, I watched them over and over again. And when he was saying things about cars, I was trying to translate that into how he might feel about our car. And I've been lucky enough to drive our car a lot, but it's the only hypercar I've ever driven. I've never driven another one. We are lucky that we've hired some people into our team who have worked on projects like, the Mercedes Project One, for example, Aston Martin Valkyrie. But again, those guys have been, small cogs in a pretty big machine as far as those projects have gone. So anyway, Jethro drove the car at Sonoma. It was part of, as a company, we were doing this thing called the California Gold Rush, where we were driving from circuit to circuit with our test car. So we started off in Northern California at Thunderhill, broke the lap record for a production car around there. Then I drove that very same car from there to Sonoma, and the morning of Sonoma was Jethro driving one of our production cars. And then once he finished with that, we were hoping to break the lap record with our test car. So anyway, there was a lot of tension.
That's a build-up. That's a build-up and a half,
because it was a double whammy. We had this, can we break 5 lap records in 5 days? And in amongst that, we're going to have, one of the kind of world-renowned motorsport journalists driving our car for the first time. Anyway, he got in the car, went out for his first lap, came in, opened the door, and said, "Shit the bed." and I don't think that's a term used over here. So Lucas, who was with us on the day, Lucas Czinger, kind of looked round at me and like, "What's that mean?" Anyway, I knew "shit the bed" meant a good thing. So anyway, I was immediately kind of calmed down, and then Jethro got out of the car and kind of, I think really importantly for us, said, wow, that is different. This is a different experience in a different car. And then, people should obviously watch the review on YouTube rather than me telling about it. But the long and short of it is, he loved it. He had a great time. He made a few minor kind of, suggestions about what he might have done differently. But I think fundamentally, he said in there, putting the technology to one side, which is incredible. We've 3D printed all of the structures of this car. We've designed and built our own engine. We've designed and built our own gearbox. We've done all of this stuff with this tiny team of people. He said, put all that to one side. You've still got to deliver a product that can stand up against the competition. And I think his words are, "These guys have nailed it." And so
wow.
That for me was wonderful. Yeah. And since then we've had other great reviews about the car. And I think what we've done is, on this kind of spectrum of, track focused and, luxury, cruising kind of GT type hypercar, my view is we're at this end of the track focused, but also a super usable car to drive on the street. So yeah, going back to the California Gold Rush, as I mentioned, we went, started on Monday at Thunderhill in Northern California, Tuesday Sonoma, Wednesday Laguna Seca, Thursday Willow Springs, Friday Thermal Club. near Palm Springs. I was the lucky guy that drove it from track to track, and then our professional driver, Joel Miller, did the racetrack drive, and we broke 5 lap records in 5 days. We drove 1,000 miles between, from track to track. And we have built this kind of Jekyll and Hyde car that you can comfortably drive a few hundred miles, up to Monterey Car Week, and then turn up at Laguna Seca and, turn a lap record that would put you on the grid of a GT3 car. It's a pretty cool machine, and credit to Kevin and Lucas for having the initial vision and kind of backing this team of people, but credit to the team of Czinger engineers and the production crew and the support crew that goes along with that for kind of just having the kind of tenacity to stick at it and kind of take those niggles and doubts along the way and turn them into kind of positivity and really kind of can do. And we're all now obviously super pumped, and we're delivering cars to customers, and we're hearing good things from customers. And I think is the birth of, what I hope is America's, new and world-renowned hypercar brand. And I think we're now setting sail for something pretty special, which is great.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I can't agree with you more. It's amazing. Honestly, like what a career. Like what a career. Still going. Still a lot of life in you, I'm sure. But your career, the journey you've gone, it's unbelievable. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's been obviously fortunate and lots of opportunities, but I also do feel like it's often a lot down to the individual to kind of put themselves in positions for good fortune and opportunity to come their way. As I said, I'm lucky that my family are the adventurous types as well, and we kind of, I kind of, say about life, you get one lap, you get one lap on this planet, and you got to go for it and live it. And but yeah, we're super happy with the move that we've made here. Super happy / relieved, vindicated that we've delivered this car and built this team, and yeah, it's been great. It's really
amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to just do a session on a few insights, if that's okay with you. So just based on your own career, like what advice would you give to the next generation of talent coming through, just from your own learnings?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was actually, I mentioned Long Beach University earlier. I was there this week doing a little presentation. There was me and a couple of the guys from the team, just presenting to them about internships and stuff. And I would say the most important thing is to figure out some angles to kind of set yourself aside. The obviously the job market is challenging. I think that with modern kind of information technology, emails and messaging systems and all this kind of stuff, again, it's in some ways become harder to get recognized, but there are also channels to make it easier as well. I feel pretty sad actually, because I used to get pissed off when I was young and applying to people and didn't get a response. But it's a real sad fact that because obviously people can get to me via email and LinkedIn, if I did respond to everybody, that's all I'd have time to do, and it's a shame. So anyway, coming back to your original question, I don't think that it's a kind of laziness problem around recruitment, but it's a busyness problem around recruitment. So I think from my perspective, I just want to kind of find these no-brainers to hire because they've somehow been able to demonstrate to me that they are going to be able to hit the ground running. They're going to be able to contribute from the word go. And so the way that I think that you get yourself into that position, I guess, really starts with volunteering. So if they're whatever industry you're looking to go into, and of course for me and the people that I'm most obviously involved with, it's motorsport. So no matter what level, go and volunteer. Demonstrate that you can get yourself out of the bed at the weekend and go and commit to something and kind of learn on the job. it's a given that you're going to have academic qualifications and that you're going to have studied a degree course. What's not given, and what kind of provides that extra confidence in hiring someone, is that they've shown that they've done some extracurricular stuff that isn't part of their normal system of gaining credits academically. So yeah, volunteer for things, and then just again a kind of level of persistence. Uh, kind of potentially opening myself up here to be bombarded, but
Just
but
thinking, I was just thinking
I
exactly that.
I definitely notice when people contact me 2 or 3 times via LinkedIn, and when they sometimes change the message that they send. It's something that I kind of spot and notice and go, this person's got a bit about them, or they turn up somewhere at something and say, oh, hi, I'm so and so, and we chatted one time before, or I sent you a message on LinkedIn. And so I think there's a level of persistence that's needed, because again, it's not like I'm lazy in responding to people. It's just that I don't have the time to. And so if people can make it a little bit easier for me, because they're kind of knocking on my door
Yeah.
more frequently and haven't been put off by the fact that I might have ignored them the first time. I hate to say that, but yeah, it's a reality. Then I think that's cool too. And then I think as well, you've just got to research the subject that you're applying for. So I go back to that Reynard program that I saw on TV. At that point, I wasn't a motorsport enthusiast, but from that point, I became one.
Yeah.
I bought all the magazines. I read everything. I bought books. I just immersed myself and quickly became, you know, a kind of respectful expert, not overly confident, such that I would, risk exposing myself for thinking I knew it all when I didn't. But I would know enough to kind of, say the right things, to talk the talk. And again, I think that's really important. And again, it gets recognised when you're interviewing people that
Yeah.
they can demonstrate to you that they've, put some effort in, put some time in, and you're not going to be, in a startup organization like this, we just don't have the time to hold people's hands, like all the way through. Of course, we are there to support, and we do support, but we're really looking for people that are kind of, self-starters, that are, motivated, that can go away and figure something out for themselves. We can, give them a nudge in the general direction, but we know that they're then sufficiently capable to go and, dig into it and figure it out for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just come to my brain this, so I've got to say it. I just think there's synergies between, like the what you see in like the SAS or like the Royal Marines. It's like if they're a Marine or if they're in the NS. I think the motorsport industry's got the same thing. It's like a motorsport stereotype DNA. And you can if you start speaking to an engineer and they're from a motorsport background, you can like gauge it within seconds.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. There's a kind of energy, isn't there, about them? Um, and yeah, just this kind of can-do part too. Um, and I think though, uh, it's also important to say that it's not exclusively the domain of those kinds of people. And in fact, one of the great things I've learned about coming to Zinger, where I think in engineering we're about 50 people now, so still tiny by most standards, but certainly the biggest team that I've ever been involved with, because my teams have always been tiny. And what that has taught me more is that you need, again, this blend of different personality types. So you need some cautious, kind of more conservative types, particularly when you're doing a road car program where there's a crash program involved, where there's a missions program involved. But I think the great thing we have here is that we have those people who have done it in a certain way, and have kind of come in going, this is how you do it. But they're also sufficiently open-minded that when, myself or someone from the motorsport world goes, have you thought like maybe we could do it this way? and they've been kind of open to that, and I think that's again been a great kind of blend of personality types, and has really been for me a key part of the success that we've created here so far at Signal.
Yes, that's a really good point. How do you think the industry is going to evolve? So we focus on maybe that supercar, hypercar space. Um, you are on a revolution yourself, which is a unique place to be. But how do you feel the space is going to evolve?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think clearly, in particular, the hypercar world is it is generally for collectors
Yeah,
of cars, and I think it's a kind of, again, a mixture of people who, some people buy them and never drive them at all. We have some who do drive them daily, but of course they've got 15 other cars and probably only 25,000 miles a year in them, and so they've got to spread that 25,000 miles across the collection of cars that they've got. I think that the space looks pretty healthy. I think that it's also, I think it is a healthy space for industry. I think there is trickle down technology that comes from the hypercar world. I think it's inspiring. I think hypercars are inspiring things for young engineers uh, and I guess, yeah, young people in general. I think posters on walls in bedrooms of young people
absolutely.
is a great thing. I think um, again, I have to be slightly careful, but I'm not really into the kind of horsepower race. Um, I kind of understand it and get it, but the thing about power is everyone's only got the four tires to put the power down onto the ground, and you kind of, you quickly kind of saturate that. And so I guess my own personal hope for Zinger, but I'm not necessarily the overall decision maker around this kind of stuff, is that we offer, you know, otherworldly driving experiences, but that they're accessible. So,
Amazing.
power becomes useful when you want to do 400 miles an hour or 300 miles an hour, because then you need the power and you've got the rubber and the kind of loads that are going through there. But setting off from a standstill, I think probably with 6, 7, 800 horsepower, that's more than enough to overcome the rubber that you've got. So my interest is more about making it kind of accessible performance and technology to give people an experience that they can't get anywhere else. So less about the numbers. But coming back to, I mean, I do believe the way that we're making cars with the printed technology, I do believe that's how all things will be made in the future. I think
That's
the
incredible.
additive manufacturing process is the future, and I think that um, it's going to take companies like Divergent. So there's loads of people printing stuff, and of course Divergent prints stuff. But to be honest, the printing bit is just a tiny bit in the middle.
Yeah.
For this technology to become scalable and widespread, it takes everything else that Divergent are doing that I think many others just aren't focused on and don't realize,
Yeah.
which is everything before you get to the printer and everything after the printer too are massive levers in getting the cost curve down. The printing um, and the fact that there's no tooling involved, and the fact that the printers are design agnostic, the fact that the printers don't care about whether the thing's hollow, don't care about minimum wall thicknesses, don't care about draft angles and things like that, opens you up to a whole new way of designing components. That is again where the real kind of value add comes from in terms of saving mass, in terms of making structures more efficient, importantly in terms of making structures do more than just be a structure. So passing fluid networks through a structure rather than having a structure that you then attach fluid networks to. Combining structures. I mean, we have this thing called break node that is in the public domain, where I like it because it's a simple example to get your head around. It's the upright and the brake caliper, which traditionally are designed independently of one another because of that built-in mindset of tooling. If we have to tool up, then we want to make a brake caliper that we can make modular and fit on lots of different uprights, because we don't want to have to make loads of different tools. So you design the brake caliper, you design the upright. When you don't have tooling and you get rid of that kind of built-in mindset,
Yeah.
and you combine the two things, you then can make the caliper help the upright and vice versa structurally. So
Interesting.
whereas they've been previously structurally independent of one another, when you join them together, you start to see the real magic in terms of the mass savings. And the brake node, to be honest, is just a small scratching of the surface of the potential of this technology to combine and integrate structures and make structures do more and more things. We as Divergent / Czinger have people visiting the facility all the time, and particularly people who have, oh yeah, we've tried 3D printing, it's not ready yet, and they come here and see it and go, okay, this is next level. Right, this is next level, and it's only next level because it's this group of scientists, technologists who are turning all the stones over and figuring out all of the many, many small problems and solving the small problems that ultimately will make this technology, the future. So, as an example, the powders that Divergent print with are their own. The metal recipes are their own, because they couldn't get people to make, or they couldn't buy what was needed, if you like. Same, we the larger structures, we bond them with adhesive. The adhesive that we use wasn't available off the shelf. We went to an adhesive manufacturer. They weren't interested in the volumes that we needed at those times. So what do? Well, let's hire some adhesive people, make our own, patent it, And so, as Kevin and Lucas describe it, it's this kind of full stack solution. And without the full stack, the thing is not useless, but is nowhere near as useful as it is when you've got all of that happening. Just kind of over there is, I'm not sure if it's but it's one of the largest metal 3D print facilities in the world. Still, by industrial standards, kind of quite small, but it's a factory that makes things for Czinger, makes things for the other OEMs that have become public, Aston Martin and Bugatti and others that have gone public, McLaren, that they're using Divergent technology, and also, of course, now aerospace and defense type stuff. It's one factory with limitless products, because all you're doing, the tools are all, the tools that exist, the printers and the robots that assemble them are agnostic to the design. It's just software that gets changed, and there's no breaking down of the facility. So you can make Czinger parts today, McLaren parts tomorrow, go back to Czinger the day after, make some air and space defense components, all on the same facility, with the facility just like passively sitting there, doesn't care what it's making. It's just making the next thing by the software that you've put in there.
It's really fascinating. Yeah. Thanks so much for the insight. There's one final insight I'm going to ask from you from a personal perspective, and it's, you've got a habit. I hope you don't mind me saying this, by the way, but you've got a habit of making the unachievable achievable. So what you're going to have to do is give some golden bullets away. How do you do that, Ewan? How have you done what you've done? Have you tried to reverse engineer yourself?
I mean, it's nice of you to say it. I'm not sure it's necessarily true, but I think it just comes back to, as I said, like, for whatever reason, as I was growing up, I kind of developed this core of, kind of, I feel it kind of here, like this inside there's like a deep down kind of, even potentially slightly cocky self-confidence that means that when things go wrong, it knocks me, but it doesn't knock me for long. I kind of recover fairly quickly from it. And like I said as well, wrapped around that kind of core, all around here, is quite a lot of insecurity, which is, as you hear in a lot of sports people, the monkey on the shoulder, niggling away, saying you can't do that, you can't do that, and I think that kind of fear of failure with the deep down confidence is really how you can develop the kind of the tenacity and the spirit of like, yeah, can be done, can do, um, and importantly, um, meeting kind of like-minded people along the way. So, you know, uh, I did start Juno on my own, which used all of that thing. I then met Lawrence and saw similar kind of traits in him about it can be done, and Kevin and Luke's are the same. I mean, all three of those guys are way more intelligent than I am actually, but share the kind of that kind of can do and tenacious sort of attitude. So um, I would just say, I mean, yeah, of course. I was saying before about you got to have this blend of different types of personality. I'm a terrible like finisher of things. I need, I struggle and slow down a bit when it gets into the detail, and so I need to have people in the team that can kind of deliver that and that are excited and turned on by the detail, because
Yeah.
that's something that I'm less excited and turned on by. So I think as well, you
Interesting.
got to really recognize your deficiencies and limitations. Since coming here, I've kind of passed through the 50-year-old threshold, and that's been like a little bit of a journey as well. And I would say in the past I may have been a bit of a control freak at times, and I'm learning to kind of you know let that go a little bit
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
and that's like weird at times. But I think as well, if you can get your head around it, it frees you up to do again the things that you can really add value to, and you can you can kind of quickly go, oh yeah, that person can take responsibility for that and deliver that, and that can become all of their problem and less so mine. So yeah, I think that would be it.
We're going to end it. So you've obviously gone into Zinger. Just if we forecast what's happening in the future, do you want to drop any needs that you've got, anything that's coming up in the future that you'd like to talk about?
I mean, I think certainly across Divergent and Zinger, specifically, I guess Divergent is about scaling and growing now and building. So the company is always on the lookout for talent. I think as we grow, we are starting to look for more specialists rather than in the early days kind of cradle to grave type people.
Yeah.
We're having to kind of put that kind of level of focus and detail into specific areas. But most of all, it really just comes back to, at this stage, I would say people that are wired for um, an element of uncertainty, that can enjoy and thrive in an environment where there's a bit of uncertainty. And from time to time, you do have to like pivot and 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 realize that that route we were taking actually has turned out not to be the way to go,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we need to kind of run in this direction a little bit more instead. So it needs people that again see that as like an opportunity rather than as a something that would sort of cheese them off, and of course, like I said, there are people like that. um, and I think as Divergent and Zinger both grow, we'll need more of those kind of people too. The kind of more stable, kind of a little more conservative approach. But right now, I think it's about people that are kind of agile, love a challenge, love a bit of uncertainty, and yeah, like problem solving and figuring stuff out. And um, something I should have said before is like having the ability to um, not see it as one ginormous problem, but lots of small problems. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
spring up.
yeah. Lawrence, going back to Lawrence at Ginetta, he used to say to me, "Ewan, it's it's not one big problem, it's lots of little ones, and you just got to keep knocking them down. And
That's
that
a great
stuck with me.
soundbite. Yeah.
That stuck with me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Listen, I can't thank you enough. It's been an absolute privilege to go through your career. I very much enjoyed it myself. I forgot I was a host at one point, so I don't normally do that. I was in awe. So thanks so much for joining us. And then the craziest thing about this whole thing is if you didn't come home that night when you had a skinful, I'm sure, maybe only a few,
Yeah.
a skinful.
Yeah.
So this thing about you can never make clear cut decisions when you're drunk is a load of rubbish. you started proving that wrong, I'll take that myself. But no, thanks so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, likewise. I've enjoyed talking to you. It's been good. Yep.